Hey friends, welcome to, I think this is Venusian Afternoons number 3. Um, Friday, March 25th. I have 3 awesome astros with me, Rob Bailey, Charm Torres, and Catherine Urban. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. And of course, we have a bunch of 11th housers here with us live. Hi, 11th housers. Thanks for being here. Um, so yeah, where do we begin? I guess we begin with introductions, right? And my favorite part, I love hearing the SMRs, and like talking about how we know each other. I don't know why that's like a fun part for me. So let's start with Charm because you are returning to the show. You haven't been on the show for a while though. I guess the last one was the BTS episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. No, I feel like the South Node transits have made me kind of disappear a little bit. But I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, everyone, I'm Charm Torres. I'm here currently in the unceded Coast Salish territory in an idyllic island in Victoria, Canada. So I'm up north. um I don't actually, I stopped sharing my SMR, but it's not a secret. But I will share that I am an Aries because my birthday is on March 27th. So,
Yay.
so my birthday is coming up. That's exciting. And I guess I know Kira definitely through the very friendly, interwebs through Twitter, but we ended up connecting in person at NORWAC 2019. That was pretty iconic because it was like the
Yeah.
pre-pandemic times. and
Hmm.
um, and since then we've connected in so many different ways. um, I guess in terms of my work, I am a professional astrologer, tarot reader. I also write. Most of my work is through one-on-one consultations. And these days, what I'm kind of really excited about and want to put out more is I want to work more with folks who are processing a lot of migration grief and diaspora stories. So I do a lot of locational astrology readings. And so I kind of want to focus on that a lot this year, actually, because I'm doing some research, which I'm hopefully wanting to get like some grant funding as well as share it to the astrology community. So yeah, that's me.
That's so exciting to hear. Yeah, I had a locational year ahead reading with you.
Yes,
I don't remember when. It
I
must
think
have
it
been
was
sometime
last
last year.
year.
Yeah, because I mean, I know it was last year. It must have been last fall. I'm doing a lot of rereading, re-listening to reading, so I'm going to make sure I
Nice.
get that one as I'm about to go travel abroad and try to find a new home.
Yes, so
So
excited.
yeah, highly recommend Charms readings, especially for folks who are looking to relocate or if you have relocated. You're super talented in that, and I'm excited that you're continuing that work.
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to. I was thinking, like, who are the people I really want to work with a lot? Like, people who are like dealing with a lot of their ancestral veneration work, as well as the grief of disconnection. And I feel like that's kind of how I want to really use locational astrology a lot, in addition to helping people relocate as well. Those are always fun. And get to sit down with people, think about their goals and intentions. Yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, it was really special meeting at Norwalk. I'm not going to say which placements, but we do have a lot of similar
Yeah.
placements, like very
Totally.
similar. So it was really lovely. Yeah, and I'll just mention you were on season 1. We did an episode with Diana Rose Harper about Venus, which was really
Yes.
special. And here we are again doing Venusian
I can't
afternoons.
avoid Venus. Yeah, totally. I'm yeah, devoted.
Yeah. And then you also came on to do an episode with a bunch of Astros about BTS, which is a really fun one
Hmm.
too.
Oh, and also the locational astrology
Oh yeah,
episode
of
with Alyssa.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been on the show. Yeah. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Catherine, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if you are comfortable sharing your SMR and talking a little bit about your practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Catherine Urban, and my SMR is Libra Sun, Scorpio Moon, Cancer Rising. So I'm a very subterranean nocturnal chart. And the bulk of my practice is informed by an eclectic blend of astrology. I started out way back in the modern tradition and of course expanded into the traditional and classical branches of astrology. But I have a background as a hairstylist. So for years and years and years, I used to talk to people all day long. So that's something I've been able to translate into my work as an astrologer. And so that's the most fulfilling area of work for me, is working one-on-one with people. So I do a lot of consultations, and I really aim to try to help people take advantage of the energies available to them. So a lot of my one-on-one sessions are focused around the year ahead, what sort of transits or progressions are coming in right now, and how can we best work with that. But I am the type of astrologer who is just fascinated by all astrology. I don't consider myself to specialize in a particular area. I just keep wanting to gobble up more and more astrology. And so I offer all kinds of services. I do electional, I do horary, I do rectification. And I just continue to be excited by new techniques. And it's a really cool time to be an astrologer right now. We're basically in a little renaissance happening. So it's so cool to see all kinds of people in our community coming out with new techniques and perspectives. And yeah, it's a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't remember how we first started connecting.
I think it was when I first joined Twitter in like 2018. We just have been Twitter, social media friends. Like, I just feel like we've been connecting ever since I joined Astro Twitter.
Okay, yeah, that's like, I don't remember any like an exact moment, but yeah, I just remember I wasn't sure if it was Instagram or Twitter or what, because we're both on both, but it's nice to finally be able to like talk and not IRL, but like, next best thing, I guess.
Close enough. Close enough. Yeah, I know
Did-
one thing we connected on is our Venus placement.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you have Sun, Venus. Do you have any other planets in Libra?
Yeah, I have Mercury in Libra.
Okay. Wow. And yeah, the beauty aspect, the hairstyling, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you said you're a Cancer rising.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Awesome. And you have a baby, right?
Yes. Yes. That's a huge part of my life, my non-astrology life. I have a daughter who's almost 2.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and she is everything. She's just, I've been like, especially like coming out of Pisces season, just totally enamored with this little being.
Oh.
And she's my whole world.
Yeah, I love seeing like when you post pictures of her and just your family. It makes me so happy. And she is like doesn't she have like a Cancer placement that is the same as yours or something?
We have the same rising, and
Okay.
that rising sign runs in my family. So yeah, we're both Cancer risings, and she got a Libra moon from me. So
Wow. That's so funny.
yeah.
I've had moms. I don't know if or any of you guys have had this before, but I've had moms reach out to me and be like, "Hey, I have to pick a day for my C-section, like out of these 3 or 4 days, like which one should I choose?" Which is always it's exciting for me, but also, it's nerve-wracking. And I had a friend who is a Cancer rising, and I picked her baby's birthday. I didn't pick the time, but the baby ended up also being a Cancer rising, which I thought was really funny.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, we already talked about how we knew each other. Am I forgetting something? No.
No.
Cool. Thanks.
I was gonna
Thanks.
say, I feel like we can do a whole episode on The ethics of electing birth. That would be
I
a spicy
know.
episode.
Oh my God. Yeah, it would.
No, I mean, I'm like, I don't want to know what people on YouTube will say to me if, if I do that episode.
True.
Tend to have pretty good YouTube comments. Only every now and then I get weirdos, but that one might be challenging. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
Rob, hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kira, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited and just feel really happy to be here with everyone today.
Me too. Yeah. And you're in Australia. So it's 1:15 p.m. on the west coast of the US. And Catherine, where are you? And
Oh,
Chicago?
yeah. So that's what we were forgetting. So I'm
Oh.
on the North Coast. I'm by the Great Lakes.
Okay. Yeah. So you're what? It's like 3 p.m. or something for you around there.
4. Yeah.
4.
It's 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And over all the way on the other side of the world where Rob is, it's like 7 a.m. So thank you for joining us so early.
Yeah. No, happy to be here. Yeah, it's funny because it's like Venus afternoons, but it's like a Saturn morning for me out here. Yeah, no, I'm the Australian correspondent, I guess, from the other side of the world today.
Yeah.
That's my SMR. So I've got Aries rising, Sagittarius sun, Gemini moon. So
wow.
lots of air and fire. Like in terms of my practice, I'm really focused at the moment on kind of reviving and reconstructing medieval astrology and combining that with modern counseling skills and like the psychological astrology perspective from like the 20th, 21st century, and kind of trying to, add some psychological sort of stuff back to medieval astrology and mixing those two together. I'm very focused on horary astrology at the moment, which is the art of answering specific questions using astrology. And what I'm doing is working with historical texts, primarily from the Islamic world, 8th and 9th century, like MashaAllah, Sahl bin Bishr, and trying to figure out how those people used astrology and then bring that back into the modern world and shed some light on that. I also do birth chart readings, again, using primarily medieval astrology techniques, but then I'm bringing those techniques and I'm applying like the modern counseling skills to that, and also focusing a bit on, well, how did the medieval astrologers assess what we call psychology today, astrology of personality and character and things like that. So I'm kind of, on this little quest to bring medieval astrology back, but also, get the best stuff from the more modern traditions of astrology in terms of that care for the client, that psychological concern, and try and sort of mix the two in a big pot and see what happens with the result. So that's my practice. It's hard to sort of summarize because I'm just doing so much. I'm so busy at the moment between like in the early stages of preparing to teach this stuff, doing readings like every other day, and trying to get some sleep in the middle of all that as well, which is tricky.
Yeah, I kind of like, I feel like when I think of you and your work, definitely there's medieval. Isn't your like business name something to do with that?
Yeah, so like when I was
old
myself, old school astrology. Yeah. For a while I was tossing up different names. It's pretty funny. Like I think I wanted to do like the old astrology or something, but then that like URL was taken, so I was like, okay, what am I gonna do?
Can I ask where your Saturn is? I'm very curious.
Oh yeah, so I've got a pretty strong Saturn. It's probably the most powerful planet in my birth chart. So it's in the 7th house, it's angular. It's in Libra, so it's exalted.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that Saturn's doing a lot of heavy lifting for me, and yeah, I can definitely see that in my life in many different ways. But the interest in history and like old stuff has been there since I was like, 8, 9 years old. I remember like getting books out about ancient Greeks and stuff like that from the library when I was like a little kid, just scouring the shelves looking for something to read that was like about the past. So like my love of history was there first, and then when I discovered astrology, I was like, oh, cool, there's this like whole angle to astrology that's like historical perspective, traditional stuff, just like inspired me so much. And I don't think I've ever really stopped being passionate about that. But like that being said, like, I'm also really interested in, using that material responsibly, updating it for modern people, modern perspective. Because like, while the techniques are really cool, obviously the culture back then is entirely different, and in some ways like not super great for human beings. So I kind of want to like update it and make it like relevant and helpful for people in the modern world with the problems that we have today.
Awesome. That's amazing. Because I was going to say, when I think of you, I very much associate you with your horary practice. Of course, you do a lot more than that, but you're about to start teaching.
Yeah.
And the way that you do horary is rooted in a tradition that's not necessarily the most like popular, right? Which I think would be like the William Lilly tradition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes. So that's one thing that I'm a little bit different in terms of how I do horary. Because I started out with that tradition. So I don't know, I'm going to talk about a little bit of history, but I guess that's just what I do, right? So yeah, when traditional astrology came back in the 80s and 90s, a big part of that was this Renaissance astrology, particularly this English astrologer William Lilly, who wrote in the 17th century. It was like, I think, the first complete textbook on astrology in English. So it's easy to sort of pick that up and read it. Well, not easy, but compared to like something in Latin or Greek, you can just pick it up and read it, And he was very interested in horary. So this huge revival of horary began in the 80s and 90s due to his work. And he was practicing right at the end of the tradition, if you like the end of the traditional kind of period. And or maybe even you could call it like the start of the modern period. And astrology changed a lot. Horary kind of began around the 8th, 9th century CE in the Islamic world. And then you've got this sort of like long 800-year history. And the practice kind of changed and developed over that period, as you'd expect. I started out learning that William Lilly style, if you like, of horary. And then with different writers bringing out older texts like Ben Dykes and people like that, I started to read these older books, and trying to get my head around the astrology in those books, because it was very different to what I was used to with the Renaissance stuff. And trying to sort of understand that material and notice the differences and really hone in on those differences, and trying to understand how the tradition changed and evolved over time has been like my passion project, I guess, ever since. And I really focused, like I said, on that really early stuff, like kind of in the same way that like the Hellenistic astrology is like the earliest, natal astrology that we have, and that's taken people's imaginations and just really captured people. It's a fascinating thing to look at. How did this stuff start? Well, I'm kind of doing the same thing with horary. Like, where did this stuff come from, and what were the earliest practitioners doing, and how did they conceptualize it, and how did they do it?
That's so exciting. Excuse me. Super exciting. Someone who doesn't really know horary, but uses it whenever I lose something.
That's the number one thing, isn't it?
It works so well, even if you don't really know what you're doing. If you know, look for L2. It works really well. But anyway, I'm really excited for that. And hopefully have you on the show eventually to talk more about it.
Thank you. That'd be really exciting. Yeah.
And we know each other from Twitter. I know that. Yeah. Are you going to make it to any of the conferences this year?
It would be my dream to travel to the US and actually meet up with some of you lovely people in person, because I feel like my community for astrology is primarily people who live so far away from me in America for the most part. And I've developed some like really like supportive and like close friendships with people through meeting people like yourself and Charm and Catherine through Twitter. But I feel this distance and this kind of like separation at the same time, which I'm hoping to really bridge at some point. This year, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I'm getting married. I've got a lot of stuff coming up. But maybe in a year or two's time, once like there's just less going on in my personal life, it will be more possible to hop on a plane and come out. And I think Norwalk's the one, right everyone, this is that's the conference to go to. That's what the vibe I'm getting from people.
So
that's
that's exciting. You're getting married though. Congrats.
I
think I knew that, but I can't remember if I knew that you were dating someone you were like super, super in love. So it doesn't surprise me.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's actually coming up like within the next few weeks.
Oh wow. I mean, obviously you elected it, but I'm curious. I'm curious if you elected it or did you get another astrologer too?
I elected it. But I think it might have been a bad call because now I just agonize over whether I picked the right time, whether there's a better time. Like, because I tried to use that Jupiter-Venus conjunction that's coming up in Pisces. I thought like, what a great opportunity, like to have just this powerful combo of benefics. I think they're like some of the best places for them in the whole zodiac, and conjunct like so. At
Venus's exaltation, like
right,
I actually elected that day for my wedding years back. I'm single. I'm not getting married, but I have another wedding date in 2024. Hopefully I'll meet someone before then and get married. But it is such a really beautiful day. But then I noticed it was an eclipse and I was like, can't get married.
Right. Everything else about that exact conjunction date on the day of the eclipse looks really perfect, but then it's an eclipse. So
my friend's actually getting married. She actually already got married, but they're having their wedding that day. And it's like happens to be in her 7th house. And I was like, I know you don't know this, but the eclipse is in her 7th. Anyway, Rob, sorry. I'm not asking you to say your wedding date, but I'm curious about that process.
It's just, let's just say it's intense, not quite as intense as picking like a baby's birth chart. That sounds like way too much power for anyone to have. But like I keep looking at that chart and going, I think I had to make a tough call between having like the ruler of the ascendant good or the moon good, and I was like, I'm gonna go with the moon, I think, because I think that's more like fundamental. But then I just agonized, like, is that the right call? Like, but ultimately I feel like we've already been living together and like co-parenting and stuff for like years and years, so like really like the chart for our relationship is probably like years ago. This is just another step. So I try to calm myself down, like the whole future of my relationship doesn't depend on this chart. It also depends on like our like intention and how we approach each other and trust and all of that good stuff. So
that's such a good point though about agonizing about your own work. Like I studied horary for 2 years, but it's definitely something that I don't feel comfortable doing my own. even at lectional, I have like the basic skills, but I always like delegate to other pros to do it for me because I don't have time to to like take care of my mental health while I figure out my own work.
I hear that.
It definitely can keep me up at night sometimes, like when I don't hear back from the person who I did the horary for. I'm like, how did it go? How did things turn out? Did they like my analysis? Like that I always try to encourage people to write back and tell me how it went so that I'm not like wondering like how did that horary play out?
That's smart. I should because I did a lot of not a lot, but I did a couple wedding elections in 2020 before, which made me quit altogether because it was so stressful to elect weddings in 2020. And people are like, one couple was like, we want to get married in like between August and September. And it was like Mars station, square set, like all the things. And I'm like, hopefully it went well. I don't know. I just elected an astrologer's wedding actually recently that just passed. And so, I mean, it looked like it was a beautiful day.
Yeah.
But it's nerve-wracking, which is why I don't do it anymore.
There's also so many inception points in weddings.
Signing the papers. Like there's the whole thing. Saying that I do versus like when the wedding actually starts, like
and imagine people with different cultural practices too. That would just like add more layers.
That was something I was electing a wedding in Pakistan. And and they wanted it in 2020. And I basically gave them like a bunch of dates, and I was like, if you can wait till January though, like at least it's a little better. And so I gave them dates in January too. But yeah, because exactly that. There's like all these different, you can't do it on this day of the week, whatever. But
different
anyway,
ceremonies.
let's start to talk. Well, actually, I wanted to see, you guys all know each other just through Twitter, right? Through the internet.
Even
So,
though I've officially departed Twitter
right.
the last Mercury retrograde, like September 2021. Every time there's a Mercury retrograde, some shit
Twitter
happening.
goes, Twitter goes insane. Yeah, it's so true.
I've streamlined a lot of my social media presence because I just feel like my attention is like such a scarce resource in my life. So but I definitely I joined Astro Twitter like 2017. That moment felt really sweet because I think there was just like very little people that was kind of convening in that part of the interwebs, but it has grown like remarkably since. So
it's a lot now. But yeah, hopefully we'll all be together one day in some like beautiful magical astro camp scenario.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, let's talk about this astro. Let's talk about this weather. Actually, I wanted to ask you, Rob, this is really random, but I just like to know people's ascendant rulers. Where's your Mars?
Oh yeah, so I'm Aries rising, but my Mars is in Virgo. So
cool.
So not your typical like Aries rising, I guess. I think people always think of Aries rising as like, I don't know, like a barbarian is going to kick a door down with a battle axe in their hand or something like that, but I'm just Mars in Virgo, so like just a very energetic nerd basically.
But there's the intuition there. I feel like the Aries Virgo is really the person who I just went to,
with your work, I guess.
Sorry, go
Mars
ahead.
in the sixth.
Sixth house. Sorry.
So one thing I'm really concerned about is my health at the moment. We can get to that later, but Mars in the sixth is like, okay, how am I like making bad health choices in my life right now? And trying to like address some of that at the moment. But I think it's a good placement for like nerding out over like old books and like, thumbing through texts and just like, not giving up in that quest to like study something.
I adore people with their ascendant rulers in dark houses. I feel like there's a kind of depth to you folks.
I love that. Thank you.
I just started talking to a guy who has that Mars at like 29 Virgo, and I saw his chart like a couple hours ago, and I'm like, oh, cool.
Ooh.
I love it. I'm a stand for Virgo placements, personally. So anyway, okay. Speaking of Aries, we all know, Catherine, you don't have Aries place. Do you have any Aries placements?
I have some decent Aries placements. Yeah, I've got Jupiter in Aries. I've got my midheaven, and I've got my North Node. Yep.
Okay, cool. So we all have Aries placements. I'm not sorry, Charm, but I won't say which one.
No, I did say I'm a sun in Aries.
Oh, you did. Okay.
My birthday's coming up. I also have Mercury in Aries. So
okay, we have sun, moon, rising. My moon's there, and Catherine has a couple placements too. So perfect place to start is Aries season. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I was literally in the sky in a hot air balloon when Aries season began. I might have been on the ground at that point, but I was in the sky that morning, and that shift was so palpable. The sun entering its exaltation, it just felt so good. And I've been pretty down in the dumps for for a couple months maybe, but just there's something about an exalted sun to really lift your spirits, literally, right? That's exalted sun lifting the spirits. Do you guys have any reflections on the equinox and just Aries season thus far?
I mean, where I live here in like the northern part of the United States, I get all 4 seasons. And so I know this is going to be much different for Rob down in Australia, but
Yeah.
here where I live, it's when the flowers start to bloom and the warmth of the sun. I love thinking about the sun exalted in Aries, just coming in to bring that sort of vitality and energetic force. And where I live, it shows up in the weather too. So we've been getting outside, which has been great because, as I mentioned, I have a baby, and so we have been, and you know, she's a baby, she's not vaccinated, so we've been playing it pretty safe and everything like that throughout this whole journey. But so of course, with the weather getting nicer, we've been outside, we've been going for walks, we've been going to the playground. I've been watching her go down slides and go on the swing. So there's just like this joy and vitality back in our house, and I'm so excited for summer now.
Yeah. Yeah. How about
So
you,
cool.
Rob?
Oh, I'm loving having the sun in Aries. Seriously. I'm in a fifth house, like Leo year by perfection of the
Oh,
ascendant.
fun.
So I'm really feeling these sun transits. It's really fascinating to sort of see just that regular plodding motion of the sun through each sign really correlates with things in my life in this like Leo year. It's been fascinating. And like sun in Pisces for me has just been me being sick for like weeks and weeks at 12th house.
Yeah.
Sun transit for me. I had like 1.5 weeks off work because I was sick, and then I got better for 2 days, and I got sick again for another like 1.5 weeks.
Oh God.
And then I was praying like, come on, just get into Aries. I know it's going to be better. And it was funny how perfect that was. Pretty much the moment that the sun moved into Aries, like that around a day or two after that, I started to feel just so much better. And like all this health stuff just kind of cleared up, and I had all this energy again. So the astrology can be really like basic and simple like that sometimes, just watching that Time Lord move through the zodiac and just seeing what happens. So yeah, I'm feeling really, really happy to have that transit through Pisces be over. No offense to Pisces people, I love you all. But for me personally, that was
it's
rough.
real. Yeah, it's really real.
And yeah, just getting back into my work, getting back on the horse, so to speak, both in like my day job and in the astrology world has been a really good feeling. Like it's like that, you know, climbing out of the sick bed and you know, getting back to the usual swing of things. So yes, very happy to have the sun in its exaltation for sure.
Yeah,
so
I think
funny that
it's.
sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead, Charm.
I was gonna say that's so funny that you say no offense to Pisces, because I'm like one of those very typical Aries people where as soon as February hits, it's like Pisces season starts, and I'm like, oh, it's Aries season soon. It's my birthday soon. Meanwhile, Pisces season hasn't even begun yet. But yeah.
Isn't that, there's like a meme going around, like when it's Cancer season, like Leos are already excited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fire signs are so rude. We can't wait our turn.
I love that. No, but I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Rob was saying. I mean, for Leo risings, and then for anyone who's in a Leo perfection, who has a sun perfected, like Aries season is like your time, you know?
Yeah.
And I would guess like Aries risings too, but especially the Leo and solar people, because I mean, I was in my Leo year last year, and Aries season specifically was like huge for me. I was on Good Morning America, you know, during
Yeah,
when the
I
sun was
remember
at
that.
yeah, and it was like the sun at the exaltation degree 19, which happened to trine my midheaven, and yeah, it was just really it was really special. And I was just like, wow, this is so exalted sun, as you know, my time lord right now, all of that. So yeah, everyone out there in a sun perfection, or all the Leo risings out there, I hope you really soak up the good rays, you know, because it's a really special time. I think Aries season is just a special time. And whether you're in this hemisphere, northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, it's like, you know, an exalted sun is definitely something to take advantage of, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when the solar ingress happened. It was the same day that Mercury was conjoined Jupiter, though. I think this is why I'm having trouble trying to remember what happened that day. And just like I'm like looking at my calendar, I'm like, oh, I didn't write anything, so I don't know actually what happened. But I feel like, yeah, definitely I'm still kind of in that like a lot of the Pisces fog. But it's a really good point that the solar ingress does kind of like in its sign of exaltation, but also thinking about Mars being, I guess, in Aquarius, even though it's really rough there right now. But I just find like Aquarius and Aries combination is like a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And the sun is just applying to Mars right now. It's applying to that sextile over the next week or so. So I like that. I love that sort of reception, even if it is Mars and in a rough spot. The fact that this exalted sun can see its ruler, I think is really good for it. And speaking of Aries, in just 2 days, so right before this episode comes out, Mercury will enter Aries and leave the sign of its fall, this messy Mercury and Pisces period. Although I have to say, although it's been annoying and messy, I don't think it's been as bad as prior years.
No.
Especially because we got it really quickly this time. It's like 2 weeks in and out.
No lunar nodes complicating
Yeah.
things for Mercury Pisces much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm
But I love
excited
Mercury
for it.
Aries because that's
Yeah,
my
I was gonna
Mercury.
say I always like rejoice when this time of year comes around and Mercury is about to enter Aries. And even without like the messy retrogrades that we had in years prior, it's just like, yes, like you're almost done. Get out of fall, get out of the ditch. It's not really a ditch, it's more like I don't know, like an underground
wet
stream or
ocean.
something. Yeah, it's like messy and wet down there, and Mercury is like, I just kind of picture it Mercury in Pisces this time around with Jupiter there, like Mercury is like drenched and hates it, but Jupiter's like, come on, like it's fun. Like Jupiter's just trying to like be like, it's cool, like we're having fun here, right? And like, tripping out, and Mercury's like, I don't like being high,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Mercury has at least assistance from its ruler right now. But one of the things I do love about Mercury in Pisces, and this is just as a transit, I mean, I love Mercury Pisces in people too, when people have it as a natal placement. I think there's some wonderful things to celebrate there. But as a transit, I always get excited for Mercury in Pisces because I think people are so candid. And it really shows on the socials, like people just spill the tea, and I kind of like it. It's a little chaotic, it's a little messy. And some people, like we had that experience with Kim Kardashian earlier in the transit where she was telling people they need to just work harder. And people were like, what?
She needs to stop it.
Yeah. So you'll get experiences like that with Mercury and Pisces, where it's just like, yeah, what you're saying makes no sense. And it kind of comes to bite you in the ass a little bit. But overall, I think it's a pretty heartfelt transit. I think people have been really sort of letting their guard down and letting their feelings out. And that's really refreshing, I think.
That truth coming out, but maybe not a truth that people, it's like they're speaking your truth, like you should work harder, but that's because Mercury's in its full, it's messed up. It's like that message is not going to be received well, or it's going to be misunderstood, or people are going to be like, why would you say that? And that, I think anytime Mercury is in its Sag or Pisces, people will speak that Jupiterian truth to them, and then other people will have a hard time hearing that, or it's like a foot in the mouth kind of thing. But it comes from that place of wanting to just like say what you have on your mind or what's going on, and not really thinking through clearly what the how that's going to be received. Like, not that it's true to like that working hard produces good results, because that's definitely not. There's so much more going on in the world than just trying really hard, because we know that that's just a very privileged thing to say and to the perspective to have. But that was what was on her mind. She said it. it comes out and she's like, no, I'm going to really own that. And it's like, no, don't say that. That's terrible.
Digging
Well, it's
herself
also-
deeper.
This is reminding me of like the oh my gosh, I feel really ignorant right now because I'm really bad with names, and Mercury's in Pisces, but the Supreme Court justice hearings that have been, or not hearings, but like what do they call it? Oh gosh.
Yeah, the confirmation hearings.
The confirmation hearings, yes. And how I think it was, I forget which Republican congressperson said this or senator said this, but they basically asked her, like, do you agree with this book that is basically saying that babies are racist? Did you guys see that clip?
I am so not hooked on, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay. So we're trying, like in the US, we're trying to, by we, I mean, President Biden and the Democrats, I don't know why I said we, but they're basically trying to get this Supreme Court nomination through. First Black woman,
Brown Jackson. Yeah.
Yes. First Black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court. It's like a huge deal. She's like overly qualified, incredible. And the Republicans, of course, are like asking her these ridiculous questions during the hearings. Like one of them asked, like, the American people need to know that you don't have like a secret agenda to enforce critical race theory into the law of the land or something. And at one point, I think it was Ted Cruz asked her, like, how to pick like a whole like poster board or something from this like baby's book about race, and was like, do you agree that babies can be racist?
Oh my God.
She's like, he was like, do you agree with this book that babies can be racist? And she literally was just like, Senator, and then she like couldn't answer. She's just like, yeah. So it's reminding me of that. Just like, what are you talking about? Like, this makes no sense. Mercury and Pisces.
Mercury and Pisces.
Conjunct Neptune.
What's interesting, I love Mercury Pisces this time around because of Jupiter's co-presence, but because I do so much like natal astrology work, like what I've noticed in my practice is that a lot of people are going through like really generative grieving work. That's what I've noticed. Like a lot of the sessions I've experienced the past couple weeks, people are sort of, there's a lot going on in the world, but people are sort of awakening into, I guess, like taking a lot of responsibility for their pain and grief. And I feel like it was really interesting to notice how people were softening, despite a lot of desperation that's going on in the zeitgeist. So I really enjoyed Mercury Pisces, I guess, this time around as like a consulting astrologer. And then I guess for me personally, I started a grief literacy certification program. I just did my level 2 and I'm about to do my level 3. And it's been really beautiful, even though I can relate to you, Kira, because we have very similar life events, but I've kind of been down on the dumps too recently. But
yeah, rough dark house transits. But yeah, I mean, that's a really great point about like, I've seen that too. People just talking a little bit more about grief and the processing of all of that. One thing for me that comes up often with Mercury and Pisces is this like rediscovery of, or not rediscovery, but this like pull towards music, art or music, but music tends to be a big one for me. And just like remembering music from your past or like revisiting music. For me, it was like right before Mercury went into Pisces, it hit my lot of Eros. And I like started listening to bossa nova music again randomly. I used to listen to it a lot and just like got hardcore obsessed with like this one song and just was like listening to it on repeat over and over and over. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's like this Mercury and Pisces transit where I'm just like, I need to be like enveloped by the sound and this bossa nova music.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, one of the things that always comes up for me with Mercury and Pisces, especially now that it's, because as we're recording this, it's sort of finishing up with that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction too, is that like I always feel called back to my spiritual practice in a pretty big way. And I meditated today for the first time in I don't know how long, because I have a baby, so that's harder. But it felt really good. And the reason I did it was because I had a dream. I had a dream that I was meditating and I was like spiraling into my third eye. And I woke up like dizzy and I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, dreams are pretty big for me, actually. And I've had a lot of people this week tell me that they've seen me in their dream this week. So
Wow.
yeah, very sort of Mercury.
And this is all your ninth house, right?
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So so I just always feel a little bit more activated and just more connected to the universe and more connected to other people. And as Charm was saying, like the grief processing, I feel like these Pisces transits are really optimal for finding forgiveness and finding like coming full circle with something. Like, of course, you have to go through the grief and you have to go through that. But at a certain point, you hope to come out the other side. And I think that Pisces placements are really great for sort of having that wider lens perspective on things and realizing that we're all connected in some weird magical way. And I think it's just a little easier to reach.
That's so true. Yeah. So the Mercury and Aries, like it's such a switch up from Mercury and Pisces. And I personally just like love Mercury and Aries. I love it in a natal chart. It's so, I mean, obviously like direct, and I find that Mercury and Aries people talk so quickly, and I love that too. Maybe this is a fire sign Mercury thing, but yeah. Do you guys have any like reflections on Mercury and Aries and that type of energy? I'm excited for all the people who are ruled by Mercury or in Mercury perfections like I am to just not have to deal with it in fall anymore. But I'm excited. We get Mercury is going to enter Aries on Sunday, March 27th. And then we get the Kazemi on Saturday, April 2nd at 13 degrees Aries. So yeah, any thoughts about Mercury and Aries? Fire Mercury.
That mental clarity will be really refreshing, I think. We've all kind of talked a little bit about feeling like moving through a fog or that mental fog, etc. It's going to be, I think, really a really nice switch. And in terms of just doing things in the world, if you've got like mercurial projects or activities that you're engaged in or that you want to engage in, well, this will be a period where that will tend to work out better or be more effective. So studying, any kind of communicating type work, technological work, brain work in general, just should be like a great time to initiate stuff or just deepen your existing engagement with that kind of work. So yeah, I think just that alone is going to be a really nice change once we feel that Mercury shifting into Aries and out of its fall and exile. It'll still be a bit of an like kind of in the lab feeling with it being under the beams when it comes out. So but that should then have that Kazemi moment on the 2nd of April, which will be really nice, like a window of opportunity to really achieve or initiate mercurial things. So I'm certainly hoping to get back into the books and get back into like working through some of the translations and things that I've had on the shelf for a while and haven't like dug into for a month or two, because I've been like kind of, it just hasn't felt right with Mercury moving through Aquarius and then Pisces, obviously not ideal places for Mercury, given the current astro. So yeah, looking forward to the Kazemi. That I was looking up because I was thinking about this, like looking at my notes and stuff, preparing for the podcast. And I was looking through some old books to see like, well, what do people talk about Kazemi, what sort of analogies do they use? And the one that keeps coming back is the analogy from like Al-Kabisi, and the Bernardi picks it up as well. That I think it was Ibn Ezra actually. All these medieval authors talk about it as the planet in the heart of the sun is like, it's like someone, like a common person, or raised up to sit on the throne with the ruler. And so there's this moment of just incredible power, where this planet is suddenly elevated to this position of authority and has this opportunity to have like the king's ear or the queen's ear, from like a medieval perspective. So all of a sudden there's just, your hands are on the steering wheel in a way that normally aren't. And that's Mercury. So it's going to be, mind things, mental things, communication. And we live in such a mercurial world right now, right? Like we're always communicating. We've got technology. We're surrounded by technology. And so I feel like, yeah, it's going to be a really welcome shift. And then we're going to see that Mercury move past the sun and, become an evening star when it eventually emerges. And Mercury tends to do better as an evening star than a morning star traditionally. So all in all, it's looking like really positive for mercurial things. And I think if you are like me in a process of study, or if you are like I said, doing those kind of mercurial projects, then this is a great time to re-engage with that work and deepen your relationship with those kinds of projects and work. So personally, really looking forward to it myself.
It's such a nice summary of the condition of Mercury.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say I'm pulling up the chart for the Kazemi at 1310, and yeah, I'm writing my book right now, and I have major deadlines that I'm like definitely going to be taking advantage of this.
Yeah.
Kazemi.
Yeah, and we have to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Charm.
Sorry, I think for me, this Mercury Aries transit is really interesting because the Mercury Pisces has been so full of being like really in the thick of the sublime and kind of really swimming in a lot of very illusory and fantasy like waters, which is also really lovely. But this Mercury Aries journey and having Mars in Aquarius at the same time, I feel like there's definitely a more astute vibe to this Mercury, but Mars's like situation kind of allows for deeper structuring or just like more integrity, or at least like I feel like Mercury Aries can be very quick and sort of intuitive as well in terms of appreciating a whole picture, but sometimes can gloss over a lot of details. But I feel like Mars's co-presence and impending conjunction with Saturn allows for more I guess like process as well as really thinking things through. So there's just this to me, like coming from a Pisces, like Mercury in Pisces, just sort of like crying and singing and dancing. And then Mercury Aries being a bit more like, okay, time for action, but action that's well thought out, as well as action that actually feels like you're leaning into some kind of courage that maybe was really hard to grasp in the last couple months. So yeah, that's sort of how I'm thinking about it.
That's a really great point. I love that.
Yeah, and we're going to have to act quickly on this transit too, because Mercury is now moving at its fastest. So Mercury is now up to 2 degrees per day. So we'll really just have 2 weeks to tap into Mercury and Aries. And I love all the insights you all are sharing on it. The only thing I really would add is that I feel like people are just like quicker to get to the point when Mercury is in Aries. Think about the opposite sign in Libra. Mercury is just like really careful and thinking. There's just like a lot of consideration about how language will be perceived. And then opposite in Aries is just very direct, very forthcoming. I noticed through my work behind the chair when I was doing hair, I always would notice like whenever Mercury and Venus were in Aries, people would just say, this is what I want, this is what I hate. and don't do this, but I want this. And they're just very, very direct and confident about what it is that they're expressing.
Love that.
And also
Yeah.
with Aries season, really, they're contending with Pluto pretty much, like, eventually. So I
Mhm.
feel like Mercury moving through Aries with like the Pluto stuff overcoming it feels very resonant of the whole Venus in Capricorn story, like since November,
Yeah.
December, even though Venus has moved on since then. I just feel like it's like a rehashing, a remembering of maybe what's been happening since like the end of 2021, as kind of Pluto, Mercury kind of moves through a square with Pluto eventually.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because it's stationed conjunct Pluto way back when. And
February
Yeah, a few
2nd,
times.
I think.
oh
February
wow.
Like
1st or 2nd.
Venus.
Mhm. Yeah, and Charm, I love what you were saying about, these planets in Aries answering to Mars and Aquarius, and how there's just more, yes, there's an impulsivity around the Aries planets, but there is more structure. I mean, Mars is working for Saturn and like begrudgingly, working for Saturn and moving towards that conjunction with it. So yeah, it does seem to be that it's more, it's very goal oriented, but also it's like you have to take the entire timeline into account, sort of thing. It's not just like as impulsive as it could be, I guess.
It inspires, I feel like it's idealistic, but it inspires taking responsibility for a lot of people, whether through their personal lives, collectively, communally. I'm really seeing that a lot, at least in my algorithm discourses, where people are sort of in a space where they're, I guess, like being more brave and more declarative about their own positions, whatever it is that they're trying to communicate in a way that, honors like all our adult abilities to appreciate nuance in context, but still be kind of really bravely honest, even with the potential of being, canceled. But that's always like such an interesting like vibe. But yeah, like what Catherine said, it's so quick, like this is happening so quickly. So it'd be interesting, how that shows up in people's like personal lives, but also in the world stage.
Yeah,
Totally.
but also I love what you're saying about bringing Mars in Aquarius as like the ruler of these Aries transits that we're having, because I think Mars in Aquarius is really level-headed, is really cool. So some of that Aries fire is sort of tamed or contained a little bit with that cool-headed, more objective approach of Aquarius. And Aquarius represents Aquarius energy is well thought out. There's a lot of consideration and there's a lot of confidence and a strong stance behind the conviction of whatever Aquarius is sort of holding on to. So I think that sort of levels and contains and helps sort of direct some of that Aries current.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, speaking of Aquarius, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about what's going on there right now. We have Venus under besiegement, sitting in between, or not sitting, but moving between Mars and Saturn. Venus and Mars made a conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius. I don't remember the date, but it happened. And then she finally surpassed Mars and has just been like steadily moving towards Saturn. So that conjunction finally happens on Monday, the 28th, when this episode comes out. And the moon's going to roll through that conjunction that same day. And Juno is also a part of that conjunction. So this all happens at 21 degrees of Aquarius. We get Moon, Venus, Saturn, and Juno all coming together. And I'm really interested in this, especially for people who might be like Leo risings and have Aquarius in the 7th, or maybe have Venus in Aquarius, or maybe Saturn ruling the seventh, Venus ruling the seventh. I'm really curious about this relationship wise for folks, because to me, it feels like it could be this very like definitive moment in terms of like, let's make this official, or yeah, like let's not do this anymore at all, which could also be, Saturn can definitely speak to that as well. But to me, it just feels like commitment. And when I think about Venus and Saturn and their interplay together, how Saturn exalts in Venus's sign, and both of their preferred domicile, or not preferred domiciles, but their domiciles trine each other's, and Saturn and Venus both have a decan in each other's signs. And so I think there's some affinity there. And the fact that they're kind of coming together with Juno, I think it can be something having to do with commitments, long-term commitments, especially relationally. Of course, it's also going to be square the bendings, square the nodes at the bendings. So that kind of adds this whole other piece to the puzzle. But before we talk about the squares to the nodes, I'm curious if you guys have anything to add about the besiegement, and then also this conjunction coming up.
Yeah, that Venus Saturn. So I think, Venus and Mars have been doing that dance back and forth together, and Venus is finally moving to escape that. But before it can say goodbye to Mars, it has to overcome or like encounter this Saturn in its own sign, this powerful Saturn. So I think Venusian themes have been really fascinating, and pardon me, particularly for people who are in who have a Venus ruled rising sign, or they're in a Venus perfection year. I'm fascinated to know like how they've been experiencing all these malefic transits right now. I feel like that Venus, I think a lot of what you said is exactly what I would say, Kira, about the Venus Saturn encounter, in terms of like, well, think about Saturn keywords. Like, I like the R words, like responsibility, respect, realism. Those are like some of my favorite keywords for Saturn. So relationally, there'll be examine your relationship from a more realistic perspective, or bringing responsibility into your relationship, or how like bringing it might be a confronting moment, or it might be a moment of like deepening and more authenticity into that relationship as well. And if you have like Venusian plans or activities, things like that you're engaged in, that's a relationship, whether that's artwork or some of the other traditional Venus things, then this might be a moment of really strengthening that, but also like deepening. It might be something where you have to confront an obstacle. You may have to abandon something. Sometimes Saturn can mean like saying no to something, but on the other hand, it can be like a committing and that strengthening. I feel like Saturn's so important in relationship astrology, in synastry and things like that, because it does talk about committing and having that backbone that can overcome difficult times. So I don't have anything more structured than that to sort of to say, but I'm not sure this is necessarily going to be a bad thing, because Saturn is receiving Venus into its own sign, and that reception always takes the edge off a little bit. If Saturn was in a sign that it doesn't rule, it's going to be behaving more problematically, let's say, and that conjunction with Venus might be something that's more difficult. But I feel like there's an opportunity here for the more positive sides of Saturn to come out, because it isn't in its domicile. So those like the positive aspects of Saturn, like responsibility, respect, etc., might come through. So relationally, if you have someone in your life that you're fond of, this might be a moment of commitment or of deep respect for that person. You might want to honor that person in a very like tangible way, like a real way. But I'm fascinated to hear what other people have to say, though, because that's a rare condition for Venus to have so much contact with malefic planets for so long. So I'm fascinated to hear what the others have to say about it, and the bendings too, because that's not a concept that I have done much research or reading about. So interested to hear what others have to say for sure.
I mean, what I
Yeah.
have to contribute to this is I was thinking a lot about the hot spot of like that 21 to 23 degrees Aquarius, where a lot of the conjunction with Saturn is going to take place. And I thought about the third phase or the third decan. I don't know how you say it.
Decan, yeah.
Decan of Aquarius. And Austin Coppock talked about it as being the knot. And when I was looking at that, it's like, oh, this part of Aquarius, that the third decan of Aquarius is so much about departure. So actually what Robert was talking about, this is like departure from a place of like deep frustration, in a sense that what is like a confrontation of what's really not working anymore. And from that place, you have to like take a leap of faith somehow to go into the unknown, but to also in a way be like, yeah, I can't continue this way. And when I think about Venus, like Venusian themes, it's really playing out on the world stage for sure. But it's interesting to definitely for folks to observe this, how it's showing up in their life relationally, even conversations around standards of beauty, for example, creative practices. When I think about Venus on the bendings, that's something I'm born with.
Same.
And I think
same.
this Venus at the bendings is towards the south node. So I feel like that purging, departure, leaving things behind that are no longer workable is really prominent as a theme. But I think also just around our the ways in which, when I think of Venus at the bendings towards the south node, it's like the ways in which we get really stuck and stagnant in like situations or states of being that maybe kind of like pushes the agenda of avoidance, right? Like it's sort of like, oh yeah, this is comfortable, this is something I'm familiar with, even though I'm suffering deeply. But I feel like this moment kind of awakens us a little bit into like, okay, maybe I can't like keep living this way. So that's sort of how I've been interpreting it. It's not easy. It's been kind of disgusting, actually.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
Venus malefic enclosure. It's such a feature of my solar return chart because Venus is my time lord coming up. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend, one of my best friends here in Los Angeles, is a Taurus rising, and she was just texting me right before this being like, girl, I can't take this besiegement anymore because it's in her 10th, and she's currently like in another state working, like helping. She works in coffee, so she's like training a whole team, and at the same time she's running a startup too, so she's like working constantly all day in coffee, and then afterwards like working all night on her startup. And it's just been constant nonstop all month since the besiegement started. And I feel for her, and she's just like, it's rough. It's really rough, but it's just hard work. All the Venusians are just in this spot. And she literally said, she's like, I feel like she didn't say stuck between a rock and a hard place, but she essentially said that. But yeah, I'm just like, I hear you. I'm not a Venusian per se. And that doesn't rule in my angles, but it rules my third house, and I'm trying to write this book, and it's been hard. I'll say that.
Hard work.
Yeah,
theme.
I have an angular Venus, so feeling sexy and desirable has been really tough.
Yeah.
Especially I think for Venusian people, that is so life affirming. But I think with Saturn's co-presence here, it kind of really makes you think a lot about the longevity of that state of being, like thinking a lot about beyond just like that superficialness of what beauty means. It feels kind of deeper, like spiritual, but also beyond age in a sense. But it's hard work for sure.
Yeah, I think the Venusian theme has been really big for us this year because we started the year with the Venus retrograde, and we were reconsidering a lot of our Venusian topics in our relationships, finances, how we spend our time, etc. And I just feel like it's just perpetual Venus themes ever since. And then, yeah, we had the double conjunction with Mars, and here we are again. And I think that Venus's alignment with Saturn is going to be so, so important, because it's going to bring a lot of clarity to the story, whatever has been sort of unfinished or unclear up to this point. I think one of the gifts of Saturn in Aquarius is clarity. And yeah, I mean, there could be some important decision making. There could be just, and the other thing too with Saturn clarity is that it's not always the clarity that you're hoping for. It's not always the clarity that you want to hear, but it's something that you need to hear. And I think that this will be so helpful, because wherever we have the fixed signs in our chart, or if we have a lot of fixed planets take a long time to decide on what it is that they want to do. They take a really long time to be confident about their course of action. So I think that Venus's conjunction to Saturn, it's this moment we've all been sort of waiting for. And I think that we're going to have a lot of that important, really definitive, like, okay, well, these are the facts. This isn't working. This is where we need to pull back or slow down, or we don't have the time or the energy or the resources to do it. Or yeah, even in relationships, I agree with what you all have been saying about DTR, like, let's define the relationship. Or I think Venus's conjunctions with Saturn, or really any hard aspect, are really those moments of checking in with those relationships, whether it's a partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's someone you are pals with or respect. It's very often a check-in, and it's like, yeah, this is something we need to work on, or this is something I want to see improvement on, or I want to see us do better in this way. So it's not fun work, but it's constructive and it's supportive work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially with Juno there, who is just like very much wants to define the relationship. And, I just feel like, I don't know if it's because I have Juno conjunct Saturn natally, but, and I've also been diving really deep into Greek myths over the past month. So it's on my mind, but yeah, I feel like Juno deeply craves equal partnership. And I think that's something that both Saturn and Venus also are like very much about as well. So I'm curious to see what will come of that. I wonder, if we'll get some nice proposals and things like that. Because that is, it's the end of the besiegement after that conjunction. And I really do picture it as like Venus has sort of just been like climbing up the mountain and preparing for this meeting with Saturn. And yeah, after that, it's just like just a week or so left before it enters Pisces and gets to really be exalted. So it's kind of like a big test for all the Venusians out there. And soon enough, it's going to be like April 9th or something. You get to be exalted and no longer under besiegement, which I'm excited about for the Venusians.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add too about Venus at the bendings of the nodes is that it's a significant choice. So everything sort of leading up to this moment, we're making some pretty important choices, because Venus has been taking her time through Capricorn and Aquarius. And so now it's the important choice whether we're going to keep sustaining what we're committed to or whether we're going to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that hurt. Just because, again, it was a natal Venus at the bendings. I have it exactly at the bendings, natally. And it's like, yeah, at the south, to the south node too. And it just feels like I'm constantly in that space of like making a choice and not knowing what to do,
The good thing about being at the bendings toward the south is that you can only go up. You can only go up from here.
That's
right?
true. I'll keep that in mind. So yeah, Venus hits the bendings on Wednesday, March 30th. And then on the 31st, we get an Aries new moon at 11 degrees of Aries. I'm stoked about that. I mean, I have an Aries moon natally, so I like the Aries new moon. It's pretty close to my natal moon too. But yeah, I mean, thinking for me, I'm really excited about that because we get both lights, both kind of sources of consciousness or perception, you could say, aligned in Aries, in the sign of the sun's exaltation. So again, this just feels like more clarity coming. And of course, with a new moon and 11th housers, we'll talk more about this in our new moon gathering that day. But yeah, with the new moon, you get this seed planting energy. You know, it's like wherever that is in your chart, wherever Aries is in your chart, you get to say, okay, I'm going to plant a seed here and watch it grow for the next, 6 months, year and a half, however long. At this point, we get, that new moon happens on the 31st. And then a couple of days later, about 4 days later, Mars comes to the conjunction with Saturn. And then, it's also at the bending. So there's that kind of caveat to this new moon, I think, is that it's being ruled by this Mars in like an increasingly difficult position. But yeah, curious about you guys' thoughts around this Aries new moon. I'll pull up the chart too.
I was thinking about the new moon, because one thing I've been learning, digging into these medieval books, is there's this undercurrent in a lot of the old astrology about the new and full moons as this I don't know, this important background to everything else that happens in astrology, like that's kind of like the base layer. So some of the old books talk about how, like, if you've got a horary chart, one thing you could look at is, well, what was the last new or full moon, and like what was happening with the moon at that time, and that gives you like extra information for like the background of what's happening. And similarly with electional astrology, they also say go and check out the most recent new or full moon and see what was happening, and that gives you like an additional like layer to like consider with your election. And I think, and then there's also natal astrology. They say that prenatal syzygy, the prenatal lunation, whatever they call it, is like really important for like Hellenistic and early medieval astrology as well. Like you pull up that chart and that's personal for you as well, like if we're looking at it from the natal perspective. So I was thinking about this new moon in Aries. It's interesting because the very next thing the moon does, that's always like the most important thing from this perspective of new and full moons, is like, what's the next thing the moon's doing? And that kind of sets the tone for the next 2 weeks. And it's nice to see that it's going to sextile Mars. That's the very next aspect it makes. And it's in Aries, so it's received. So that's kind of looks good for Mars things. But then there's also that other layer that you mentioned, Kira, which is that Mars itself is, being dominated by this Saturn at the moment. It's in Saturn's home. Saturn's right there. And Mars is having to like conform to that Saturnian way. So I do think like for this period, like of course, Mars is a malefic, etc., but it's because it's received and this is a sextile aspect to Mars. Do you feel like this might be a good period for, more positive or constructive Mars themes? So courage, bravery, taking on a challenge, approaching things with energy, diving into something new, those kinds of things. But with that Saturnian thing going on as well, approaching those matters with realism and respect and responsibility, the 3 R's, the 3 Saturnian R's, will probably make those things work out a lot better. So have courage, but also be realistic, like have energy, but also like be responsible with how you're engaging. Like it's an interesting combo, Mars and Saturn together. It can be like really, it can be really like constructive, definitely, because Mars needs, I think, some Saturnian wisdom sometimes. Like, we don't want to necessarily
exalt in Saturn's sign. So
yeah, that's it. Hey, so I feel like having more strategy, maybe that's a good Saturn keyword, is like strategy to how you approach these martial things. So yeah, have courage, but use your brain and like be responsible about how you're approaching these things. But that being said, yeah, I think it's a good time to initiate or like deepen Mars themes and topics. So yeah, if you're
Mhm.
into like working out, if you haven't been to the gym for a little while, might be a good time to re-engage, that kind of thing, you know, or yeah, like other, like approaching a challenge perhaps might be a good time to take on something that you're afraid of. I know we all suffer from a bit of like, especially in this modern world where we're so overwhelmed with things, like sometimes we have those emails we've left unread, or we have that task that we haven't done, that bill that we haven't, that letter we haven't opened or whatever, because
Are you talking to me specifically? How did you know?
so like that
Have you
fear
seen the pile of mail on my counter? Or
I have one too, like it's out of shot right now, but if I don't want to deal with something, I'll put it in my little pile, and this might be a good time to like attack that pile, you know. That's my
good
thinking.
advice. Yeah. Worth it to note that this new moon is also conjunct Chiron at 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are all great points. I love that you made the point that, yeah, Mars and Saturn together can actually be really constructive if approached correctly. And I think, just like you said, like taking action, but having forethought and making sure you're thinking about things in the long term and not necessarily just like what's right in front of you,
Yes.
is really important. And it's hard with them at the bendings, because the bendings, it's kind of this weird, funky place. To me, it's almost like, I don't know, I think of like the Bermuda Triangle or something. Like to me, the bendings are this place where planets get really confused about what direction they're oriented in, and like what time even is. It's like everything gets very warped at the bendings, bendy at the bendings, you could say. It's like funhouse mirrors. But it's like, yeah, the confusion can be difficult, and it can kind of be, where am I putting, what is this the right thing to put my effort towards or not? So yeah, it can be confusing, but I think it could also be really constructive, like you said.
Yeah. And what you're saying,
a lot of the I think a lot of the bendings, just to add to your bendings point, I think a lot of the planets in the bendings is like they're like the crisis managers, because I think of the lunar nodes as like crisis points in any chart, like in an event chart or person's chart. And the planets in the bendings almost function like they're there to answer to the crisis, in the sense that they become instrumental to actually figure out how to balance and manage that opposition and that tension. And so it's interesting to kind of watch Venus be there, and then Mars also be there in terms of that. But I'll add my new moon point, but go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what Kira was saying about just like feeling like not sure about which direction to go, and how that makes so much sense being in an air sign of Aquarius. And just thinking about, I love what you said, Rob, about how that can be a constructive way to work with Mars, to maybe find a way over a hurdle or work our way through some sort of block. But I think too, some people will probably experience that sense of being stuck. And what do I do? And it's so interesting because the Aries new moon wants us to take action, wants us to take initiative. And yet we have this thing that's sort of keeping us stuck that we have to tend to, perhaps. And the thing that I wanted to just segue that into the Chiron conjunction is that I think that the new moon conjunct Chiron is really highlighting this Chiron in Aries story that we're all experiencing. And something that's really been popping into my mind is how powerful it can be to reclaim your story and to sort of take a moment and rewrite your story, even if it's just mentally. Because we all have a Chiron, we all have that wound that never fully closes, no matter how much work we do or how much we learn or how much wisdom we accumulate. And I think that sense of having that Mars, Saturn, that stuckness, maybe a way that we could think about moving that energy that keeps us back when we want to go forward is, how can we reframe our story in a way that feels more victorious, by maybe focusing on the things that we have overcome and the things that we have accomplished in spite of it all.
That's so beautiful. Wow.
I forgot I was muted. Yeah. No, that is really beautiful and so true. I feel like, yeah, both luminaries kind of passing over Chiron is very much like a spotlight on the wound, right? It's like you can't really ignore it when both lights are there. But we have to like that's necessary sometimes to kind of be reminded of those sort of core wounds so that we can move forward with, you know, recognizing and acknowledging them and their the place that they have in our stories, like you said.
Yeah.
I love all of your reflections on this new moon. The one thing I'll just add is that by tarot correspondence, it's signified by the Three of Wands. And when I think about this moon before, you know, the balsamic moon before becomes new, it conjoins Mercury and then it's new and then, you know, goes towards Mars. But it makes me think a lot of the Three of Wands as like, you know, picking up momentum. And it's also prophetic in a sense, especially with that Mercury on its way to become Cazimi eventually. So it feels like there's a lot of optimism available with this new moon that feels like, you know, a sense of moving forward. Even without clarity or tangible form, there's still some sense of intuitive foresight available. So it feels prophetic to me, particularly when I think a lot about Mercury's journey as well. But yeah, all of your reflections about Mars and the need for structure to kind of make these things happen as well.
Yeah, Venus will be out of besiegement at that point, and Mercury is so close to the luminaries there too. It does feel that way, prophetic, and to me, like going to see the oracle and just like getting some clarity, even if it hurts, you know, even if it is a little like you wince a little bit. The clarity is so necessary, and again, with it being applying both luminaries applying to Mars and Aquarius, it's like that kind of just underscores that sort of like being able to see clearly and to see with perspective. Kind of when I think of Aquarius, I think of like bird's eye view perspective and kind of seeing the big picture and being detached enough from it to like, you know, think rationally and make decisions from that place of rationality. Because yeah, at this point it's like only Jupiter and Neptune left in water signs once we get there. And so, and they can't see anything that's happening with the new moon. So yeah, it's like still a party in Pisces, but it's not really a party until Venus gets there, right?
No.
So yeah,
I think one thing we
go
haven't
ahead.
actually said about Mars in Aquarius this whole time is that Mars being in Aquarius with Saturn is actually very organized. I feel like it's strategic and organized in that way. And I think the part of the Saturnian detachment sometimes is really necessary in order to make certain things happen for the bigger collective. Like that it's not just about you or that one person.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Venus enters Pisces on the 5th. I don't know why I thought it was like the 9th. Okay. So I have it written right here. So yeah, we have the sun, both luminaries hitting Chiron between the 31st and the 1st. The sun hits Chiron on April 1st. And no, that's not an April Fool's joke. It's actually happening. Saturday on the 2nd, we get the Mercury direct Cazimi. And as you stated before, Catherine, this is like Mercury at its fastest. When Mercury or Venus is conjunct the sun and direct, any planet, I should say, conjunct the sun and direct, they're at their fastest. It's like they're moving at their quickest pace. Which is, again, if you think about Mercury and, you know, the houses it rules, the areas of life it rules for you. And if you're a Mercurial, you know, if it rules your first house, like things are going to be moving pretty quickly, right? Like you're going to probably feel like the pace is picking up. And the fact that it's in a fire sign, like exacerbates that even more. And then we get on Monday, April 4th, Mars is going to conjunct Saturn. I think it's at 22. I know that actually because it's exactly square my natal Mars and I'm not looking forward to So yeah, that's happening. And we've been kind of slowly marching towards that. We last had our Mars Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius in 2020. It was April, right? I think it was like
March
first couple of days of
31st,
April. Okay, March
2020.
31st. Yeah, 2020. And for me, this is my 12th house, and the experience I remember, I just remember being so scared. I just remember like I couldn't get off the couch. I slept in the couch for days. I was living with my parents at the beginning of pandemic. I was supposed to move to LA on March 17th, and the pandemic hit. And I was really, really scared, mostly that my parents were going to get COVID, or that I secretly had COVID and didn't know it. And, I was going to kill my family, basically. Like, I just remember being terrified, and also just thinking like, okay, this is like the end of the world, like it was just such a scary time. And kind of what got me through it even was just being like, Kira, this is your 12th house. It's just like anxiety, right? Like this isn't necessarily real or true or tangible. I mean, of course it was, not to say, I'm talking about the fear, not COVID. COVID is obviously very real, but yeah, the fears that I had of like, my whole family catching COVID and shit. But I will say, and that was my Saturn return. My Saturn's at 1 Aquarius. So that conjunction happened on my natal Saturn. This one's happening exactly square my natal Mars. Malefic fun times. But what I will say is that it really, the fear brought me so much closer to my spirituality than I had been in a really long time. And I started, regular planetary prayers around that time. And I just started doing a lot more, a lot more spiritual work, a lot more magic work, just to like for protection, basically. And, my Mars rules my 9th house. It's in my 9th house natally. So it has a lot to do with my astrology practice and my magic practice and all of that. And so I'm curious to see what comes up with this one. But yeah, think back to that, March 31st, April 1st, 2 years ago, at the very start of this whole new world that we're now living in. And it's interesting to think about like that was the beginning, and here we are 2 years later, and like what this next conjunction might mean. But yeah, curious about you guys' thoughts or reflections on that.
I think for me, it's so much about intellectual and cognitive ways of coping, especially when I think about that time 2 years ago and where we are today. So it's kind of actually interesting retrospective to think of what has happened in the past 2 years. But this new beginning cycle, I guess, between Mars and Saturn, for sure, it makes me think a lot about how we want to be really present and aware, I guess, from information context, sort of like being well informed in order to actually guide the actions that we take from that. And that's and I think it shows how I cope too, because at the time I think what I ended up doing was like hardcore research and thinking a lot about what I need to know in order to protect myself and my community. And I think even from there, it started a lot of discussions just around how we socialize, especially during that really trying times where there was so much scarcity and lack and fear, for sure. I think Mars and Saturn's conjunction this time makes me think a lot about how we want to marinate and stew on things and let a lot of what we learn really kind of settle deeply and in a way be very deliberate and intentional about the action that we take from that place of deep learning. So
totally, especially in regards to like the collective and our communities. With it being an Aquarius, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that Mars just sort of energized Saturn in that case, where Saturn in Aquarius, I mean, that's been just like a definitive symbol for social distancing. And so I'm wondering that with this 2-year cycle being completed, but it's still in Aquarius, and it won't be in Aquarius next time. So this is the last time we have this Mars Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. I'm curious about, because it seems like a lot of, at least here in the United States, a lot of states are changing the general protocols, and I'm sure that's happening elsewhere in the world too. So I'm wondering if it's just like a re-energizing around what are the precautions that we need to take going forward and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that I'm curious to see what happens. But I'm never gonna look at a Mars Saturn conjunction the same ever again. I feel like this has been imprinted, and this is something I'm going to be watching for in the future.
Yeah, very much so. Well, there's just one more thing I want to talk about to kind of like lift us up a little bit at the end of this, which is Venus entering Pisces on April 5th. And we won't talk about it too much because we will talk about it more on the next Venusian afternoons. But again, you Venusians out there, the Taurus and Libra risings, you're finally going to get your time. Because you guys have been put through it, with the Venus retrograde, conjunct Pluto, all the times it conjunct Pluto, and then being besieged and just kind of being in Saturn's domain for many, many, many months. Not only entering exaltation, but entering exaltation with Jupiter. I've been talking about Pisces as a hot tub, Jupiter's hot tub, psychedelic fun party hot tub. And I really do think that when Venus joins, like that's when the party starts. Like that's really when the Pisces goodness begins. What do you guys think?
I really do see it as, a celebratory transit, especially with Jupiter there. Of course, there's all those Piscean connotations and associations with, psychedelics and, mind altering, and then Venus moves in, and, Venus is definitely the life of the party, right? It's the planet of joy and pleasure and all those good things. So I was struck by how both inner planets, Mercury and Venus, right now where we're at with the astrology is a process of moving past really difficult stuff and into a period of like relief for both Mercury and Venus. And I think it's like a season of like a real transition out of difficult things for these two planets and into spaces that are much more functional and welcoming for them than they've been experiencing recently. Of course, I mentioned at the start of the podcast, I'm getting married under this transit. So I've been really looking forward to Venus moving into Pisces, and then eventually, of course, conjoining the ruler. That's probably for another podcast in the future, Kira. But I see this as like a celebratory time or a time of relief. I guess the only thing I would add to that sort of rejoicing quality to this transit is like, of course, Jupiter is a planet that blows things up and makes things big and increases and, likes to expand. And with Venus in exaltation, there might be a risk of excess. There might be a risk of, just going a bit too far, like jumping too much into the deep end, to use like a watery metaphor. So, watch out for that. Watch out for that. I mean, I don't think it's maybe, there is such thing as too much of a good thing, right?
Yeah. It's making me think of like the festivals coming up. I know Coachella's coming up in April, and festival season is here, or it's pretty much here. And I'm thinking about that and the overdoing aspect, and especially when it comes to drugs and partying. And that's a good point.
I hate to be that boring, like 40-year-old guy. It's like everything in moderation,
Saturn is still in Aquarius, Saturn's still in domicile. So
it's Saturn hour out here, and I'm being, oh, actually, I think it might have passed now, but yeah, I'm being the Saturnian voice in this.
No, it's
yeah.
important to note, because I think that's something that people have, talked about even with Jupiter and Pisces, people who have been sober, like finding it a little bit more difficult with Jupiter being in Pisces, or it's worth it to note for sure, because it is a lot of a good thing when we have both benefics, both super dignified, in the
I
same
also thought
sign.
spiritual stuff as well. Like, let's not forget that Jupiter is traditionally the ruler of like spirituality and religion and like traditions of faith, And so Jupiter's already just so strong in Pisces, and it's coming up to Neptune. So there's like the mysticism is a theme. I know, Catherine, you were talking earlier about like deepening some of your spiritual practices. I've also been experiencing that. And I wonder whether Venus moving into Pisces and meeting up with the kind of the ruler of faith, might be a great time as well to engage in like meditation or prayer, whatever your practice is, whatever your faith tradition is. I'm excited. I'm cautiously optimistic, Saturnian. I'm cautiously optimistic about this. I think it might be a really great time spiritually, as well as in terms of just like having fun. We can really dig into our spiritual side, our mystical side.
Yeah,
Venus in Pisces is the meme that's like moisturized, lubricated, happy and flourishing in my lane.
Yeah.
A very lubricated Venus. Finally, after such a long dry spell, though.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
We had
Drink
our
the
last
water.
Venusian afternoons that we were talking about dry ass pussy and this Venus, besiegement. So yeah, we're definitely looking into like, lots of moisture. I'll just say that.
Yes. Yeah, especially after the retrograde and then being in the Saturnian signs. Not that we have an issue with Venus and Capricorn. We like that, but the conditions of it, the retrograde and everything. So yeah, this is Venus's moment. This is the party. She's able to be in a place where she can be more comfortable. And one of the things I love about Venus and Pisces is I feel like Venus is more generous and more receptive to other people. And one of the images that comes to my mind, especially with Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces, is just like an open palm where we're ready to receive, but also offer something on the altar, perhaps, where it's definitely a more devotional placement. And I think that can show up in a way that is also really platonic or really romantic, where we're just more generous and more giving and more maybe attentive to creating magic in our relationships. And the other thing, just to quickly piggyback on what Rob was saying about the devotion, one of the friends of the podcast, Oscar Moises Diaz, they just made a post on Twitter about how Venus actually has a lot of connections to like ritual from ancient texts. And I was meditating on that and just thinking about how Venus has a lot to do with music and having domicile in the air element. There's something about chanting and the sound current and bringing that full circle to the festival. Like, let's get it.
And dancing too, like the dancing, the joy, the fun aspect of ritual. I'm going to be talking about that this weekend. I'm doing a talk called Signatures of a Witch's Birth Chart. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that, but that's a really great point as well. I just want to say one last thing about this pile up that we're heading towards in Pisces with Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune. I've been kind of thinking a lot about cults. And there's this TikTok cult. A dance TikTok cult. And it's like these people that are in this cult and they're just like, make these, like, they're dancers and they make this like really intense TikTok dances. And I'm curious if something else is going to come up around these cults, especially that one during that time. So I'm just putting that Easter egg in and maybe in 2 weeks, I'll follow up on it when we talk more about Venus and Pisces. But yeah, there's a dance TikTok cult out there, and it's really creepy. There's a lot of creepy cults, coming up. And that was something I've kind of been predicting about this year with extreme Aquarius and extreme Pisces. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. But
well, even in the entertainment right now, there's such a fixation on documentaries like Bad Vegan or
the scammer ones, the scammer documentaries.
Yeah. What was it? The something swindler. What is it?
Tinder swindler.
Tinder swindler. Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah.
There's a lot of cult-like behavior that I think even transcends the word cult now. And it's very polarizing in all contexts, actually. Something is visible, I guess, online, but I feel like a lot of them are happening on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll talk more about cults in the next Venusian afternoons. But for now, we have to wrap it up. This was so much fun. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much, Kira.
This has been great. Do you want to go around and tell the people where they can find you? Rob, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So you can find my website. It's at oldschoolastrology.com. And I have my blog there, which I intend to write more in. I always say that, and I never do. I think it's like Mercury and Sag problems.
Hey, I'm right there with you.
It's like I want to do this, but can I? And then I'm also like quite active on Twitter still, like for better or worse. So you can find me on Twitter at oldschoolastro.
And you'll be announcing the course at some point.
Yeah, that's right. I've been really blessed to be working with legendary astrologer Chris Brennan, and we're putting together this course on horary that I'm going to, God willing, fingers crossed, etc. I'll be hosting on his website, Astrology School. So very excited about that.
Awesome.
But there's still so much more to do. We're really only in the early planning stages, so I don't want to get people's hopes up too much. Like just watch this space, basically. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm going to try to get you guys on once you're in a better place to talk more about it. So TBD. But yeah, thank you.
Thank
Catherine.
Let's see. I have my website, catherineurban.com. That's Catherine with a C, Urban with a U. And you can find blog posts. You can find that's where you can book a reading with me. And other than that, I'm on all platforms at Astro Catherine, and I regularly put out YouTube videos. I share them on Instagram. Twitter is more for banter for me. I don't really self-promote on Twitter. That's just like my community space, I feel. But that's a little bit about how you can find me.
Awesome. And Charm.
Yes, I am at charmastrology.com, and I do write on my blog. I write monthly horoscopes for a Canadian publication, Chatelaine. I'm one of the contributing writing astrologers for CUSP, which is Kira's co-founded app, and also CHANI's. So I do write content. On Instagram, I'm at charmastrology. And on my website is where you can find me to book consultations as well.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you, 11th Housers, for joining us. Always a pleasure. And we'll talk to you all again in 2 weeks at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.